This is Lowell Thomas in New York. He made it. Charles A. Lindbergh, Lucky Lindy as they call him, landed at Le Bourget Airport, Paris at 5:24 this afternoon.
An explorer who revolutionized the aviation industry with a single flight across the Atlantic. An explorer whose endeavors led the world to believe that air travel was possible, catapulting the start of commercial aviation. An explorer who later used his fame to exchange ideas about America's involvement in World War II, leading to encounters of criticism and controversy. Charles Lindbergh. Charles Augustus Lindbergh was born on February 4, 1902, in Detroit, Michigan. From a young age, he showed exceptional mechanical ability, and he later enrolled in the University of Wisconsin at the age of 18 to study engineering. In the early 1920s, barnstorming emerged as an early form of aviation. Pilots performed daredevil stunts with their planes for public entertainment, but the prospect of flight still seemed to remain out of reach for the average American. For Lindbergh, the thought of exploring the skies was far too captivating to stay in school. 2 years later, he became a barnstormer himself. Lindbergh said, "The life of an aviator seemed to me ideal. It involved skill. It brought adventure. It made use of the latest developments of science." His early successes in the aviation field earned him a reputation as a capable, cautious, and skilled aviator. In 1919, Raymond Ortigue, a wealthy businessman in New York City, had been captivated by the stories of the pioneers of early flight. He offered $25,000 to the first pilot who could fly non-stop between New York and Paris within the next 5 years. Lindbergh was confident in his skills and abilities as a pilot, and he knew that he was capable of such a flight. Lindbergh had a vision for the plane he wanted to create, a simple and lightweight aircraft with a single engine. Hearing of Lindbergh's search for a single-engine plane, Ryan Flying Company of San Diego offered to build one for just $10,000. The Spirit of St. Louis was completed 2 months later, on April 28, 1927. The scheduled day of the journey was cold, rainy, and muddy, conditions unsuitable for flying, but Lindbergh decided to take a calculated risk and go ahead with the flight. On May 20th, 1927, at 7:52 a.m., the Spirit of St. Louis took off from Roosevelt Field in New York, the start of a transatlantic flight that would change Lindbergh's life and the aviation industry forever. Lindbergh's encounters during his flight were unlike any he had experienced before. Cold weather and fatigue were just some of the problems he met while in the air. Despite these conditions, 33.5 hours later, Lindbergh landed in Le Bourget, Paris. He had flown a total of 3,610 miles across the Atlantic, and he did it alone. He electrified the world and led them to believe that air travel was no longer a dream, but a possibility for everyone. After returning to the United States, 4 million people gathered in the streets of New York for the largest ticker tape parade in the city's history.
Lindbergh's flight was a fantastic and a tremendous inspiration to individuals that allowed the average person to think that they could also learn to fly and experience, the sensation and the thrill of flight.
Lindbergh had catapulted the next phase of aviation. With every flight, Lindbergh explored new ways to make air transportation a safe and reliable method of travel. He flew through a number of uncharted airfields, which led to further explorations of air routes throughout the United States and in other countries.
While Lindbergh is doing flights to Alaska and flights to different areas in South America, he's showing people that route. How do you get from A to B? And other people were jumping on saying, okay, we want to open up more cities and more cities.
As a result, America gained more confidence in air travel, and commercial aviation began to flourish. In 1928, less than a year after Lindbergh's famous flight, 60,000 people had boarded a commercial airline. By 1929, that number had tripled. People began to fly. Lindbergh's desire to explore what was believed to be impossible went beyond aviation. Soon after completing his flight across the Atlantic, Lindbergh's sister-in-law, Elizabeth Morrow, began to suffer from heart disease. a disease that the medical technology of the time could not treat. This inspired him to explore the possibilities of an artificial heart in the medical industry. In 1935, Lindbergh had completed the perfusion pump with the assistance of surgeon Alexis Carrel. The perfusion pump was a mechanism made out of Pyrex glass that circulated air and essential fluids throughout the body during surgery, an early form of the artificial heart. The pump was considered a medical breakthrough, paving the way for the development of the first true artificial organs. His explorations continued to make him a well-known figure among many, but it was his fame that ultimately led to encounters that would alter the course of his life forever. In 1932, tragedy struck Lindbergh. His first baby, Charles Lindbergh Jr., was kidnapped, held for ransom, and killed by Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Wanting to escape the press that followed the kidnapping, he moved to England in 1935. While in England, Lindbergh received an invitation from the Nazi government to visit Berlin and inspect the planes that the German Air Force was planning to use during World War II. He was under the impression that the United States, which at the time was suffering from the effects of the Great Depression, was no match for Germany's military strength and superior technology.
He was of the opinion we shouldn't join in the fight, that America should just be isolationist. And because he's a public figure, because he flew across the Atlantic first, having that view was very controversial at the time.
Believing that he could not stay silent any longer, Lindbergh returned to the United States in 1939 and soon became one of the leading figures of the non-interventionist movement. To convince the rest of America that staying neutral was a good idea, he joined the America First Committee in April of 1941, where he exchanged his ideas through public speeches and radio talks. One of these exchanges, a speech given at an America First rally in Des Moines, Iowa on September 11, 1941, was his most hostile encounter yet.
The Roosevelt administration is the third powerful group which has been carrying this country toward war.
Attacks against Lindbergh heightened after his Des Moines speech, specifically from the press, the public, and President Roosevelt himself. During his time in the America First Committee, he was publicly criticized by Roosevelt, compared to both a Copperhead and a Nazi. These encounters of controversy had such an effect on Lindbergh that he resigned his Air Force commission. Lindbergh's image as an American hero was quickly fading. Lindbergh's encounters of controversy did not stop him from continuing to exchange his ideas with the rest of the world. Despite previous criticism, Lindbergh went back into the public eye to exchange his strong beliefs on the subject of conservation, publishing several articles and giving public speeches for the first time since World War II. Although his reputation was tarnished by his previous exchanges during the war, the public was still willing to listen to his ideas.
He believed in an ecological balance between nature and man, and felt that preserving all the cultures of the world, all the humanities that existed throughout the globe, felt that they were all critical to sustaining life on the globe forever.
Lindbergh later said, "I realized that if I had to choose, I would rather have birds than airplanes." On August 26, 1974, Charles Lindbergh died of cancer in his Maui home at the age of 72. He was buried privately on the island before his death was announced to the entire world, a world that was forever changed by his explorations. Lindbergh once said, "For me, the spirit of St. Louis was a lens focused on the future, a forerunner of mechanisms that would conquer time and space," and he was right. His flight from New York to Paris broke the barrier of long-distance travel by airplane, showing the world the possibilities of aviation. The boom of the air age that occurred after his flight still continues strong today, as people all around the globe can travel farther distances in shorter amounts of time, allowing them to explore the world that Lindbergh had previously explored himself. Though he encountered criticism and controversy throughout his life, Charles Lindbergh revolutionized the way aviation was viewed, forever changing the lives of people all around the globe.
Like an angel